Middle of the week as the Buckeyes get ready for the Purdue Boilermakers coming up on Saturday in West Lafayette. The kind of thing that just sends shivers up your spine. If you're a Buckeye fan, for whatever reason, there's not a whole lot you might say is kryptonite with Ohio State's program. And I know Purdue doesn't look like a world beater kind of team this year, but the idea of going and playing in West Lafayette is just not all that comfortable. We're going to tell you why the Buckeyes should still win this weekend, what to keep your eye on, and frankly, who to keep your eye on. And we'll get you caught up on the latest news and info from outside of the facility. It's coming up next on the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Happy Wednesday evening, everybody. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with Anthony Moeglin. You're watching the live show on the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast Wednesday night, getting ready for the Buckeyes and the Spoilermakers. I think it's one of their favorite nicknames. Certainly, they have a whole bunch of wins as unranked teams over top 5 teams. I don't know if they could pull that off again this weekend, but it is certainly a storyline. Anthony, I don't want to sit here and get a little over my skis and say it could never happen. It shouldn't happen, but Ohio State also has, as we've said this year, looked human. So I don't know, anything could happen, right?
Anything could happen, man. Isn't that the beauty of college football? And honestly, going to West Lafayette is not a comfortable spot for Ohio State. For Ohio State fans, we all know the pain that was would have been 4 years ago now, which was turned out to be just a total beatdown in West Lafayette when the Boilermakers got us 49-20. I mean, that team was equally outmatched as this one is, and I think it's going to be advantage Ohio State, but you still got to do it. You still got to show up on Saturday afternoon and make it happen.
I mean, I think there's at least one major different element, and that's that Jeff Brom isn't there anymore. And for whatever reason, maybe it felt like, he kind of had Ohio State's number a little bit. Certainly no offense to their current coaching staff. Purdue, I don't think they're terrible. I just don't think they're very good. When you allow Iowa to score 20 points and you lose to Iowa, you're not going to impress me. They're 2-4 on the year. They haven't looked great in the Big Ten, and they've got a really tough test here this weekend against a defense that, right now is the spotlight unit on this team. Ohio State's defense is certainly a top 10 unit in the country any way you cut it, and you could easily argue that they're a top 5 unit. And I'm just not sure how Purdue is going to consistently carve them apart.
Yeah, I mean, this defense is, it's in that elite category. You talk about all the top defenses across the country. Ohio State's the first one that comes to mind. And it really just going back today and kind of looking at the notes from last week and even just watching a couple clips from that last game, it just was even more impressive, just being now removed from that Maryland game a little bit, just how clunky the offense was to start and just how rock solid the defense was. And like we talked about it, on Monday's show, just how important that was and how much of a confidence boost that is, not only for them on the defensive side, but it's a confidence boost for the offense. Like, hey, we struggled early, but our defense is good enough to kind of keep us in games. And this week is going to be no different. And the best part is, we saw a lot of comments and kind of some of the conversation early on, and this week has been like, could this be a trap game? Overlooking overlooking Purdue to look at Penn State. And the nice part is that Ohio State hasn't played well enough yet where they can overlook anybody. And it's like, and their coaches know that, they know that, like they have so much to work on that it's like, hey, we're not going to be worried about overlooking them. And if you're Purdue, you're like, oh my gosh, if you were Purdue, you wanted Ohio State to win last week 72-0 and look perfect and be great. But they know that Ohio State's offense is going to come out and they're going to try to hit on a couple things. And they know that defense is like, hey, we're only giving up 10 points a game. We're not letting them score more than 10 points a game because we're going to keep our great season kind of going and intact. So it's going to be an uphill battle for the Purdue Boilermakers this weekend. And I'm excited to see kind of what Ohio State's really tempo and flow is early on in this game, because I think that there's so much that we can look for as we kind of get into it.
You're dead right, man. The idea from Purdue's perspective of like, man, I wish the Buckeyes would have just absolutely steamrolled a good Maryland team. Maybe you'd have caught them a little flat. On the flip side, Ohio State, I don't think was looking past Maryland, and they came out a little flat, right?
Yeah.
So, you play into the psychology of it however you need to. I don't want to talk too much about Penn State either, but I will at least point out the fact that, as Penn State has evolved throughout the year, I do think Ohio State is a better football team than they are. I don't know that I 100% felt that way right out of the gate, but Penn State doesn't seem to have the downfield passing attack that I thought they were going to have. And, they are a little less dangerous offensively as the season's progressed than I expected, but they're still an excellent football team. And next week's game should be a ton of fun. But I want to focus mostly on Purdue here.
Before we get, are you referencing the clip that everyone's seeing now?
Oh, well, yeah, even that. That was hilarious. Sure.
He's like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't even know how to respond. Hey,
you're making my skin crawl.
Dude, tough for the guy. I know, because you could hear it. You knew exactly what he was trying to ask, but it just came out wrong. And he definitely caught James Franklin coming off of a bad meeting or a bad film. Like something was not right there. It wasn't that bad of a question. He just didn't get the phrase.
I will say this, though. I actually defend Coach Franklin. For anybody that doesn't know, you could find it in 30 seconds on Twitter. There was a reporter that asked a question to James Franklin yesterday about Drew Aller not, taking shots down the field, and basically said something like, at some point, do you have like some kind of balance of like, just tell your quarterback to chuck it up and trust your receiver to make a play? And James Franklin was like, you want my quarterback to just throw it as far as he can and hope somebody's going to catch it? Like, no, strong, no. Yeah, no.
He's like, I'm uncomfortable. He goes, that question's making me crawl in my skin.
Look, the reality is it was a funny clip. I will say, though, the reporter, I checked it out on Twitter. He actually, first of all, he owned it, but he backed it up a little with some clips of, examples of things he was trying to get at where, there have been instances where balls have been thrown up into double coverage, and the Penn State receiver, in whatever situation he was referencing several times, went up and caught a somewhat miraculous play. So I understand what he was saying, but we'll dive into that more next week.
Very funny. Yeah, very funny.
It was hilarious for sure. I don't really expect Hudson Card to kind of have a 350-yard passing day against the Bucks. I guess more than anything else, and let's maybe start on Purdue's offensive side as you go through some of the personnel. I don't want to like negate what they're capable of, but I don't see anybody on this team that I'm like, whoa, that guy's the top of the scouting report. No matter what, like he can't beat you.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. And the feel of Saturday is gonna go back to weeks 1 through 3, where it was Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky. Maybe not so much Western Kentucky, but where Indiana and Youngstown State tried to just take the air out of the football. This is going to be the feel of the game. And remember when Coach Day was like, hey, we only had 8 possessions and this and that. Like that's going to be kind of the vibe of this game and the feel of it. Because, they're led by their running backs and before we even get into that, they're 2-4 in the year. Lost to Fresno State, gets blown out by Wisconsin, blown out by Syracuse, and a loss last week to Iowa. So some bad losses on there. A couple good wins. Beat Virginia Tech and beat Illinois pretty handily, 44-19. But really, what their MO is going to be really try to take the air out of the football. They're going to be led by their running backs, Tyrone Tracy Jr. And Devin Maccabee. Both of them, Tracy's got 296 yards on the year. Maccabee's got 372. They got 5 and 4 touchdowns respectively. So even their top guys aren't stat sheet stuffers and have, they are averaging a pretty healthy yards per carry, just around 4.5 to 5 for each of them. So they are, running the ball effectively. But like even there, even that, if you're getting 5 yards of carry and you only have 300 yards on the year, you're not popping anything big, and you're really not a huge home run threat. And that's really the MO of the offense, is running the football, and trying to take the air out and shorten the game as much as you can. And that's gonna be evident all across the board on Saturday.
Since we started with Purdue's offense, let's talk about Ohio State's defense for a moment. Been some interesting conversation this week, some of it by fans, some of it by media members, around Ohio State's linebacker play. And there have been a lot of people clamoring for C.J. Hicks to get more opportunities. Jim Knowles certainly gave, a nod to Cody Simon in the way that he's been not only playing but practicing, and saying, I've got to find a way to get him more live reps because he's earned it. I know we talked a lot about the game when we did our film review on Monday, but just from an overarching perspective, are Ohio State's linebackers performing the way you expected them to this year?
I honestly, at that broad of a question, no. Like, right, we came into it and saying that those two guys, Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, are going to be the anchors of your defense. And yes, there is definitely stuff that they do that's intangible things that can't be replaced, such as just being the quarterbacks of that unit, making sure guys are lined up correctly, making sure the back end's lined up correctly, and doing stuff that a fifth-year senior like Tommy Eichenberg will do. So that stuff you can't replace. However, you want to see like more production out of them. Some of the stuff, and we didn't get into a lot of it, but you can go back and find it. Like, objectively speaking, on Saturday, neither of them played good. Neither of them played well. Excuse me.
Tommy had like 13 tackles. I mean,
he had 13 tackles. He
had a big stat sheet game. But you're right. There were more moments than normal where he was kind of locked up.
And it was like, it wasn't like super out of place, but just kind of getting blocked and just stuff that they can improve on, and they need to, because obviously we keep saying it, but the competition is going to start ratcheting up. But I almost think it could be like this, Brendan. It could be like a wake up call to them, and not that they need it, but like, hey, they're the conversation this week. It isn't Kyle McCord. It isn't getting the ball to Marvin Harrison. It isn't the running backs. It isn't like the conversation this week's been kind of primarily around the linebackers. And it's like, oh, this is a really good opportunity this week to come in and play great and just be really, really good. And they have a really good opportunity to do so. So I almost think it could be like it could end up being a net positive. Last week kind of took a step back, but now this week, they can kind of improve and show everybody that, hey, we are the right people for this job.
Well, I think Josh Proctor, Lathan Ransom, and Sonny Styles have put this defense in a position where it's taking some pressure off of the guys in front of them. Last year, I felt like there was so much pressure on the back end of the defense because they kept giving up big plays, and whether it was their fault or not, they were the ones that ultimately were, you've got the hero shot and the goat shot, right? The hero makes the play, the goat's the one that's on the wrong end of it. And too often last year, Denzel Burke in particular didn't really have a great year. I'm not saying he played terrible, but he certainly didn't play like he did his freshman year. And he's taken a massive step forward here in 2023. So I think the fact that the back end of the defense is playing as well as they are, and that maybe they're not as susceptible to getting burned because the Buckeyes are bringing so much pressure from their linebackers and from their defensive line. It's kind of everybody's helping everybody. And maybe that doesn't give you the same like overall just eye-popping, gaudy, awesome stats, but it's an easier game to coach and to play, and it's a team you can get behind because you feel like, all right, fine, they may give up some first downs. You might give up a 10 or 15 or maybe even a 20-yard play once in a while. But Ohio State still hasn't given up a 40-yard play all season after giving up 8 of them in their 2 losses combined last year. So they've really taken that big overarching problem, essentially just eradicated it entirely.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. Like, how much did last year carry over where it was like, hey, the linebackers had to be so spectacular because the guys up behind him, weren't playing that well in a lot of different areas, not necessarily even just throwing the ball. Like maybe even if it's a run fit thing, like, hey, last year Tommy had to cover up 2 gaps because he didn't trust what was behind him, so how much did that carry over? You never know. But that could be another thing too, where, hey, Coach Knowles pulls Tommy and Steele into the meeting room. And it's like, hey, we're going to do a film session. Just watch Latham, just watch these guys on the back end, watch Sonny. You trust them, like literally trust them. And you just have to do your job, whether that's plug this gap or get in this coverage or blitz this way. Just do your job, because these guys on the back end, not only are they not a liability anymore, but they are a strength of this defense, and you can trust it. And now just take that burden off you and just do your job. You wonder if that's part of the conversation as well.
All right. On the flip side, Ohio State, couple offensive notes. Ryan Day seemed to be encouraged by Emeka Egbuka's injury. Still hasn't put a timetable on it. I don't know that he ever publicly will, but he certainly indicated that it didn't seem to be a long-term thing. That's good. And perhaps the one guy that hasn't really gotten any run this year at all, that fans are trying to figure out, hey, what's he got to do to get on the field, is Dallin Hayden, who last year, when he got his chances, looked really solid. And I think there's this infatuation for sure around the next big thing that's coming. And, Dallin Hayden came in as one of the truly premier running backs in the country. And he suddenly finds himself in a room with a lot of really good dudes in front of him. And Ryan Day alluded to the fact that they would like to try to get him some playing time, but ultimately have considered trying to preserve a year of eligibility for him too.
Yeah, that's exactly what, you took away from, the comments that Coach Day made, is like, hey, this is a long-term play. Yes, we all saw him last year, and he was awesome, and he is awesome. But we have 3 guys right now that can get the job done, and you don't want to force something and take a year away from Dallin Hayden when, hey, let's hope Travion comes back and is able to go. And then you love what you're getting from Chip Trayanum. Like, yes, he may have struggled last week, and maybe not so much struggled, but just last week didn't go the way we wanted it to, but he's shown spurts. Mayan Williams, he had a tweet last week or this past weekend where it was like, hey, maybe he's thinking he should get some more carries, the ball in his hands a little bit more. So they got 3 horses that can go. And he even acknowledged, he's like, yeah, Down's ready. He can go. We love what we're seeing out of him, but we don't want to just use him to use him. We got 3 guys we trust. Let's keep Dallin. Let's keep that, that arrow in our quiver, if you will, and make this a long-term play as opposed to, hey, we need him right now.
All right. So when Kyle McCord and the Buckeyes take the field on Saturday, what can we expect from the Purdue defense?
Yeah, Purdue defense, they're all right. They get after the quarterback. That's one of the big things. They have 18 sacks on the year, which is second in the Big Ten. So they do get after the quarterback, and that's something to definitely keep your eyes on. And something that we watched last week, like, hey, sometimes – whether it's situational focus, we had some really good comments in our video on Monday of, hey, is it more situational? Is it Kyle's fault? Is it the line's fault where he's taking sacks? But regardless, it's a whole team effort, and these guys get after the quarterback. So that's an emphasis. Protect Kyle McCord, keep him upright. We're playing at a grass field, so his jersey, the goal is that it comes off the field white. You don't want it to be green. Keep him upright, keep him standing up is going to be a huge point of emphasis. In the back end, they're led by safety. He wears number 31, Dylan Thyman, 53 tackles on the year, 3 picks. And he's really the only guy of note in their secondary. So keep that ball away from number 31. And then one of their linebackers really gets after the quarterback. Kaiden Jenkins, 6 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks. Think of it like the best way to kind of compare it. Guy everyone knows, TJ Watt. He plays that outside linebacker position. He can drop in coverage. I'm not saying he is TJ Watt, but he can drop in coverage, but he can also come after the quarterback. Very athletic there. But it's advantage Buckeyes, and it's got to be advantage Buckeyes. The biggest thing that I'm looking for on Saturday is they have to start fast. Like, it's no excuses. And it doesn't mean we don't need 40 points in the first quarter, but you need your first drive to end in points. You need your second drive to end in points. You can't be 3rd and 16. You can't be backed up. Like, this offense needs to come out of the locker room, whatever, if they take the opening kickoff or if they get the first punt, we got to go right now. There's no more waiting around. That's a huge area of improvement that this offense needs to take.
And I hope because of what you pointed out, the nature of Purdue's defense, they try to really get after the quarterback. I don't know that I believe in their pass rush the same way, as George Karlaftis when he was there. Although, quite frankly, those that remember the streams that we did a couple of years ago, I mean, Tommy Zagorski and I were actually not all that high on Karlaftis in the grand scheme of things, even though everybody else thought he was awesome. I would think that Ohio State wants to try to take advantage of Purdue's aggressiveness, because if I'm playing against the Bucks, I look at their offensive line and say, let's go get after these guys, right? I mean, young quarterback, offensive line's not playing great. Who knows if Travion Henderson's going to be 100% healthy. I know what's being said publicly, but he didn't play last week. Maybe they just say, hey, we're going to just try to bring it. And so if I'm Ohio State, I think a good chunk of their scheme needs to be around trying to take advantage of Purdue's, pretty aggressive mentality.
Yeah, no question about it. And you'll see early on really what Ohio State's plan is, and really how they're going to who's going to control the tempo on offense. Because like when we talk our defense versus their offense, like it's heavy Ohio State controlling the tempo, and like Purdue's going to have to respond. Ohio State's offense isn't at the level yet where it's like, hey, we're going to come out and we know it's going to go, and Purdue's going to have to adjust to us. Like, you really need to take it to these guys and really just control the tempo, control the pace right from the start. And that way you're playing from ahead, and not maybe but via score, but you're playing from ahead, with your play calls, with your tempo, with your speed, and just keeping them on their heels. So that's really what I'm looking for early on Saturday.
Should be a lot of fun. Can't wait for the game without a doubt. I mean, I really am looking forward to being there and seeing how the Buckeyes get after it here this weekend. And in the meantime, we know that it's a busy night down at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We've got plenty of coverage coming your way, although there's obviously Anthony and I are from home today. But the Ohio State coaches and players that are available tonight to the media, Brian Hartline, Coach Fry, Coach Keenan, Coach Larry Johnson, Kyle McCord, Julian Fleming, G. Scott, JT, and Caden Curry are all supposed to be made available to reporters tonight. So for all the latest on what those guys had to say, I'm sure we will have videos posted on this YouTube channel here shortly, so you can check that out here anytime you'd like. And as always, for the latest news and info on the team, BuckeyesNow.com is your written home. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you later this week here as we continue our preview for Ohio State and Purdue as we get really close now to the midway point of the 2023 season.